regarding the relationship between the soul, the body, the mind, and the senses. And as metaphor, it uses chariot. There is a very famous metaphor in Kathopanishad where it compares the body with a chariot and the mind with the reins, etc. That you want to know Atman, you want to realize Atman, that's perfectly okay. But it is not an easy job. Why it's not easy? Here it takes the metaphor of the chariot. So, just imagine a chariot. Chariot has horses, there are 5 horses, and there are reins. And the reins is controlled by the charioteer. So you have now 4 things: the chariot itself, the horses, the reins, and the charioteer. And there is a passenger. He sits in the chariot, he sits inside. So he says, Atman, about which we have been discussing. Atman, it is the passenger or the owner of that chariot who sits in the back of the chariot. And this body is like the chariot. Body is a chariot. Ultimately, body is very important. See, very often people think that we are Hindu religion is a very pessimistic religion, negative religion. No, it's not like that. Hindu religion puts a lot of emphasis on the body and on the world. It cautions. This is the body. This body is the most important thing that you have. And this body is going to take you across everything that you want. That's why suicide is strictly prohibited. You need to take care of your body and fully. Because whatever you want to attain, so much so, even if you want to commit suicide, you will have to take help of your body itself. Unless you have that strength in the body and consequently in the mind, you cannot even dream of committing a suicide. Body is very, very, very important. When people are very weak, they can't commit suicide. There has to be some strength. And according to Hindu religion, if you commit suicide, it means nothing. It just means that you will wait for some days in the ghost world and then you will be reborn and you will have to start from exactly where you had left. So the body is very important. Body is like the chariot. And the mind is like the reins that control the horses. And buddhi, intellect. Mind and intellect, there is a difference. Mind is by nature vacillating. Sometimes you do this, sometimes you do that, sometimes you think like this, sometimes you think like that. And intellect is something that is by nature firm. Whatever you have studied in life, whatever opinion and ideas that have been formed in your mind, and the ultimate dictate that comes to you. For example, there comes a moment in your life when you are indecisive. You think whether or not to take a particular path. There is some kind of conflict situation. Then intellect comes into play. And intellect says that, do this. It affirms. So mind, when we say a person has weak mind, essentially we mean to say that he has a weak intellect. The term is buddhi. Buddhi is weak. Mind is never weak. The nature of mind is just to go on gathering and to go on sifting data. It just go on pigeonholing data. It is the buddhi, the intellect, that decides what to do and what not to do. The way the charioteer, he controls the reins. This buddhi, it controls the reins. And the reins itself are the mind. Now imagine the chariot is running. There are the 5 horses, they are the senses, where all around is wild field, green fields. And Bhokta, the enjoyer, is one who identifies oneself with this body and mind. Now, if the horses are wicked, horses are uncontrolled, that means your senses are uncontrolled, then what happens? It will run wild. It will leave its path. It will run into the maybe green fields. It will go for the wild. It will just go wild. Now, if the horses are going wild, they need to be controlled by the reins. And the reins are controlled by the driver, the charioteer. If the charioteer is weak, he cannot apply the reins. He cannot control the horses. The horses need to be kept under check. And the relationship between our senses and the world is same as the relationship between the horses and the green grass. Horses have a natural tendency to run for green grass. Senses have a natural tendency to run for the objects of the world. So our eyes like to see beautiful sights. Our ears like to hear beautiful sound. It is in the nature of the senses. There is nothing mysterious about it. There is nothing great about it. It's a very simple thing. It is in the nature of the senses. Now, if you really do not want to look at beautiful things, there is something seriously wrong with you. And according to psychology, if you are a spiritual person, that also means that there is something wrong with you. Because a normal person doesn't want to be spiritual. Either you are mentally ill or you are spiritual. In either case, you are abnormal. To be normal means to be worldly. Because worldly people judge. See, we like to judge people the way we are. We are the standard to judge people. Normalcy means to be of the world. So when you find that somebody is not interested in the world that is all around, it means that there is something wrong with him. Either he is mentally ill or he is spiritual. Because it goes against the normal train and says, the way a weak charioteer cannot control the horses, so a weak intellect, buddhi, cannot control the senses. And so what happens? There will be a major accident. The horses will run according to their will. Even if you are trying to apply the reins, nothing will happen. So a weak driver, imagine a racing car, and there is a person who doesn't know how to apply brakes, and he is driving. There's the plight of a weak charioteer, and then what happens? The whole thing will topple over. And the person who is sitting, he will be thoroughly injured. And that's what we have been doing all our previous births, not in this life, previous births. We have been injuring ourselves and injuring ourselves. And now we are so full of injuries, we don't know what to do with our life. Now the funny thing is, you can start reconstructing your life any day you want. Because Atman by nature is absolutely perfect, it's infinite. It has identified itself with those things. You just need to get on with the journey of your life. Control those reins, control the horses, and keep moving on the path. Your destination is fixed and you are bound to reach the destination. Once you reach the destination, you will know that you are the ultimate owner of everything. You are one with God. Now people whose mind is under control, because mind acts as reins. If the reins are weak, even then the same thing happens. A person who is constantly devoted to God, whose mind is always absorbed in God, he makes his horses like a controlled horses and well-trained horses. For the charioteer, these are the real noble horses that can take the chariot to the goal. And unfortunately, those people whose horses are not under control, that means whose mind is not under control. What happens to him? If your horses are wild and your reins cannot control them, then what happens? You cannot reach that destination, Tat Padam. Tat Padam essence means the spiritual state. Now, this is a metaphor not to be taken literally. So the way you take a chariot to reach a destination, just like that, you take help of your body and mind to reach that destination. This spiritual state where you realize the oneness of everything, you realize that God alone exists. Says that if your mind is not good and if your senses are wild, and know that you can never complete this journey. So what will happen? Samsaram chadi gacchati. You will be born again, again, again. You will die. You will be in heaven or maybe in some other sphere for some time. And then you will be back. You will be born again. And in this new birth, once again the journey of the chariot begins. And then there is accident. You go back to the starting line. You can never reach the finishing line. And it begins again. And it continues. And that's how the world goes on. If somehow you can keep your horses under complete control and the reins are tight, then the horses reach the destination. And once you reach the destination, you are one with God. Tat Padam. That state of highest spirituality, you reach that. That a person who has his mind and senses under complete control, that means is always conscious that he has to be spiritual, he needs to reach that spiritual state. He always stays pure, he never gets into impurity. Impurity comes in three forms. It's through body, through your words, and through your mind. You don't let impurity touch you at any of these three levels. And it is then that you reach that highest state from where nobody ever returns. It's something like, crossing the gravity. Once you have the escape velocity, you cross Earth's gravitational bound and you never come back. Everything else has to come back unless you attain that escape velocity. This is just an example. So if your mind is completely under control, your senses are under control, then there is nothing in this world that can stop you from becoming fully spiritual.